Hi there, folks. We are back. I know we've done a couple of these videos. We have a retailer's perspective. We have another retailer on the line, Mr. Rick Preuss, and we do have Sandy's perspective on what's going on in Florida. If you're not aware, we have a whitelist being proposed, and there's a little bit of a stir in the community about that. Rick, I know you're very close to that. And what's happening in Florida is that a whitelist is being proposed, and this is going to, regulate what animals are able to come into Florida and what we can have in the future. And Michigan went through this a little while ago. So if you can kind of tell us a little bit about your whitelist experience, how you were able to work with legislation, and what kind of steps kind of helped with that.
Yeah. So we had an interesting situation where, showing up at my doorstep was the uh, person in charge of the fisheries here in the state of Michigan with the Department of Natural Resources. And he was asking for some um, industry support on implementing or regulating new legislations that came through, and it involved a whitelist. And basically, what they wanted to do is come up with a list of all animals that we're allowed to have, as opposed to animals we're not allowed to have. And he was a bit apprehensive about the whole idea. And so, what he decided to do is, with our help, call asking who is in the industry here in Michigan. So we gathered a list together, and everybody was invited to the table. And there was 30 of us of different businesses in Michigan that basically wanted to hear what the new law that was passed meant, what's required of us as retailers, and then they wanted, that is the Department of Natural Resources, wanted to understand what they were now regulating. And what first task was to submit to them a list of what animals we have as best we could. And a few weeks later, they came back and said, we need to maybe rethink this because there was 14,000 names on that list. And it didn't take too long to figure out that that would be an unmanageable regulation, and that maybe what has been in the past might be more applicable, and that is maybe to expand what they would refer to as a blacklist. What is it that they are concerned about? And so they gave that some serious thought, came up with some strategies for which that would be more effective. And then we went back to the senator that proposed the whitelist, chatted with him, and he actually supported both a delay of implementation, and then he supported the idea of changing it to as it is now, which is a more regulated blacklist where there's actually some registration that we didn't have before and some accountability we didn't have before. But by and large, it was to just take a what's not supposed to be here approach rather than what is supposed to be here approach. And it was actually the Department of Natural Resources, with our assistance, showing up at the hearings and contributing any information we could, give our opinions and our suggestions, that came up with the idea of implementing a more new, improved blacklist approach. And I think it's important for everybody to understand it sounds maybe even fantastic to some, especially some legislators, because they passed this. At first notice, it would certainly make sense. Yeah, we don't want these animals in here, and we want to be able to control what animals come in. And that makes some sense. And so for anyone that's just listening to like a law that comes past their desk, they're going to look at it and say, yeah, that makes sense. But when you think about it, I relate it back in my mind. How I visualize the difference between a white list and a black list would be, I kind of go back down to the Wild West, the frontier, right? And we're establishing these towns and villages, and yet there tends to be some unsavory characters that we want to be careful about, bank robbers and such. And so, one of the villages could have done one thing. They could have said, okay, let's put pictures up of all the individuals that we want in this city. And anybody that's not on that wall, we have to ask them to leave, or we have to investigate, or we have to interrogate them. They didn't choose to go that route. I bet you no city went that route, and that's because it would be um, impossible to regulate. And there's something to say when you put up a most wanted poster. Everybody in the community now knows that that particular character is unsavory and we need to get him out of town. And so the point I want to make about a blacklist is that that's exactly what it is. It's an inspector that can easily identify because he only has to memorize maybe 150 specimens instead of 15,000. Florida's going to have more than Michigan, so it might be 20,000 to know about. And he needs to know about the ones that are truly concerning. And then what's beyond that, that in and of itself can be difficult because there's a lot of locations that want to have animals. And with those locations that want to have animals, they all have clientele, they have employees, they have the owners, everybody that's involved in the network of distributing these animals now know what those 150 specimens are. And now you have the watchdog of everyone looking out for those animals. There's not one person in that chain of people that I mentioned that could ever take a look at 20,000
Right.
and then recognize the things that are outliers. Oh, I don't think that's on the 20,000 list. So just for the sake of legislating or regulating, I would say, what we're trying to do, and that's to prevent bad characters from getting into our natural waterways or our land, focusing on how a blacklist works well and how we can improve blacklisting rather than trying to go to something like a whitelist, because that's not, it sounds great, it seems appropriate, but in actuality, in real world application, it's just not going to have the teeth or the opportunity to solve the problem that they're looking to solve. And they have a big problem to solve, right? We don't want to discount that,
No.
but we want to help that, And I don't think going down the whitelist approach is going to really bring effective monitoring, which is what they need, because we need all eyes on, all hands on deck. And
Right.
the easiest way to get all hands on deck is to let people know what to be looking out for. So that's my general thought on the whitelist. And
Sure.
what ended up happening when it was all said and done was we developed a very tight relationship with our Department of Natural Resources because they appreciated our input, and they also appreciated the fact that we were there trying to cooperate and help them in any way we could. And so it wasn't
Absolutely.
like saying, no, we can't do this. It was kind of like, well, do we want to do this? And if we do want to do this, why? And so instead we went another direction, and it worked out for the Department of Natural Resources, and it worked out with the players within the industry.
I think that's a great approach, and having it be a partnership and working together. As you said, it sounds great on the surface, but when you get to the nitty gritty, the sheer numbers of it, and trying to do risk assessment against those numbers is very challenging.
Yeah, and I think that the cooperation of the industry, for instance, Seagrass Farm as a distributor, as your farmers, more as your importers, the
Sure.
more that we can develop a close relationship and no sense of animosity between the government agencies and those players that have their livelihoods at play here, the more likely you're going to get cooperation on, okay, so we have these animals coming in. What are we looking for? What are we wanting to flag out? Let's work with you together. Let's make sure that if things show up that we're concerned about, we bring it to your attention. But the more we can all be educated on this, the better off we'll be.
Absolutely. And certainly Michigan is surrounded by their waterways. You don't want to invasive species. Florida, we're in the same boat, a little different, saltier boat, but same idea. We don't want
the thing
issue.
I think the thing that the the one thing I always remember them saying from the Department of Natural Resources, hey, this is an industry that wants to support, the non-introduction of invasive species. They didn't know what they were going to work with, which is exactly why they
Mhm.
invited 30 different entities in to a group meeting to share and find out where everybody's attitude is at. And everybody, it wasn't a rebel, we can't do any of this. It was more a cooperative concern about their
Mhm.
own livelihood and also about the state that we live in. So,
Absolutely. I know our tag group is working very hard on that. So we have people on our end as well down here in Florida, working on that. So if you're watching this video, keep an eye out for the alerts that will come out. Pan will certainly put out alerts, to kind of keep the industry pointed in that direction. And this is something that can affect your aquarium hobby, certainly what Preuss Pets can carry in their store. And we want to just make sure that, both the industry is protected as well as our waterways.
exactly. Exactly. It's to our benefit all the way around. We just need to do it in a way that it's going to be helpful.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Rick. I know you are crazy busy with the store and,
Well,
constantly doing all the great, wonderful things you do.
you bet, Shelby. We appreciate thinking of us, and we're more than happy to help.
All right. Well, great. You have a great day, and we'll talk later.
You too.